Okay, morning everyone. It's 10 o'clock and we're just going to start on time just to be respectful of everybody's time. I'm going to give Catt the introduction she deserves in a second, but first of all, thank you so much to everyone for coming online today. And I know we've got a lot of people from different time zones looking to listen to the recording, which is great. Just a little bit of housekeeping. And that is, we would love you to be as involved as possible. So there's a little chat room there. I'm going to keep an eye on it so Catt isn't distracted. So Catt, if you don't mind, I will maybe just jump in every now and again and just ask you some questions as we go along. So please do make it as interactive as possible, and we will try and keep it to the hour, unless you'd like to run over. So I'm going to read, Catt, because I always forget, but I also got some feedback from a couple of the panelists last time who maybe don't know a huge amount about us as a company. So I just wanted to kind of give us an introduction almost, because, you know, although we've put these revenue ready webinars together, we are a revenue management software solution, and we really aim providing hotels forecasting, rate recommendations, and great reporting, really aimed at that independent hotel sector. And our job is really to do the smarts so that anyone in that revenue position can do the strategy and work on that. So we are a full-blown revenue management solution. But we have put this Revenue Ready series together as we really wanted to give back to the industry at this time. And we are so privileged to have such great speakers and top experts, obviously Catt being one of them, who give up their time freely to be a part of this. Now, this is our second series. We had one before Christmas. So this is series 2, and this is really about the operational revenue management, what's actually affecting your customers. So it's amazing that we have Catt with us today. Just to let you know that next Tuesday, we have the wonderful Heather Hart, who is industry god about meetings and events, and she's going to talk about revenue management and meeting and events. And then the following Tuesday, we have Ciara Crossan talking about the wedding industry. So please, if you haven't done so, register, because this is a closed event. We're not making these recordings public. So if you'd like to hear them, even if you can't join us on the day, please do register for them, and then we'll make sure that you get the recording. So Catt, I'm going to just say a little bit about you. So Catt started the global distribution journey with UTEL in 2002 before joining Hotel Res in 2008. With 5 years at Supranational Hotels as commercial director in between. You then returned to Hotel Res in 2016. So they couldn't get rid of you, Catt. You kept coming back like a bad penny to develop the company's strategic partnership program, working with key groups and properties globally. Catt has held sales and account management positions, managing portfolios of account including global representation companies, private label GDS groups, and independent properties and groups across the UK and Ireland. Catt regularly represents Hotel Res members at HEDNA, the Irish hoteliers will know Catt as a familiar face at the Irish Hotels Federation Conference. For me, Catt, I'm dying to get into your presentation, but for me, I think working in hotels for 20 years before starting Right Revenue and working as a consultant, I found the biggest area of confusion was the GDS. It was this black box that some people knew a little bit about, some people knew a little bit more, but often some hoteliers knew very, very little about it. I guess I feel very privileged in that my background is travel, so I understand the GDS and the GDS codes and things like that. But I think today is going to be just great to kind of open that black box, see what's in it, and no better person than you. So I'm going to kick off with you. If you don't mind, I will, I'm sure, interrupt you with 100 questions. But again, please, for anyone who's just joined us, we've got 80 something people online now. So please feel free to put some questions in the chat. That's when the fun starts and the magic starts, when you ask questions. So please feel free. Catt, over to you. I'm going to let you kick off.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all the questions in advance, and for the opportunity to talk about my favourite work subject, which is GDS. So we've got quite a lot to cover. There you go. Towards the second half of the presentation, we'll really dig into 5 key areas where you can make changes today, look at things today to improve your GDS and business, and also to look at the channel as it applies to your customers. And if I was to say one thing at the very beginning, this is all about your customers, how your customers are booking, how they arrive at your hotel. So we saw in James Bishop's presentation a couple of weeks ago that there was a lot of analysis of the different channels that are producing and how this has changed post-COVID. In every key market, the GDS is in the top 12 of the top revenue makers behind hotel bookings. So in the UK and Ireland, it's the 5th, as a whole, it's the 5th highest booking channel. So obviously booking.com, Expedia are often at the top. We've seen a growth in hotels' own website bookings, but the GDS is very much still there as a channel that is used for these accommodation bookings now. Up to 2019, and I haven't put the 2020 figure on the end of this. At the beginning of 2020, Amadeus wrote an article saying, will 2020 be the year of the GDS? And without COVID, it probably would have been. If we look at the growth from 42 million hotel bookings in 2000 to 79 million hotel bookings in 2019, that trend has been consistent, with only relatively small dips with the financial crisis, the ash cloud, 9/11. So we very much expect to see that recover. I know you're going to ask when. The BT, the Business Travel Association, recently have produced some figures that suggest that there's going to be a full return to 29 figures by 2025, which is obviously quite a long time. However, we are still seeing properties being booked. We are still seeing agents booking via the GDS, and I think the summer showed us that there's a lot of pent-up demand, and just as you were saying, Adrienne, that you were looking forward to getting back to your office, there's an awful lot of business people who are looking forward to getting back to their offices, and there are still the essential business travellers booking now. So we see key sectors that are staying in our hotels. Like I was talking to one of our member hotels yesterday, who is seeing business from Network Rail, is seeing business from Balfour Beatty, government law courts. I think medical is also a very interesting one. With the rollout of the vaccine, there is demand, also with things like radiotherapy, with hospitals that provide that. If you're on the West Coast Island, or if you're on the West Coast of Ireland and you need to travel to Galway, or if you're on Mull and you need to travel to Glasgow for treatment, people are still staying in hotels, and many of the travel management companies like Capita are facilitating those accommodation bookings now, because there's an even greater duty of care and people are even more aware of their duty of care. So a top tip would be, look at what sectors are still moving around in your area. Start close to the property. What's next door? We've got a massive hospital over there, for example. That's where I'd be starting to look at where this business is coming from. GDS tends to produce a higher average rate than the other channels. Now, there's a number of reasons for that. GDS does tend to have largely, particularly the corporate, a shorter lead time. And as we've looked at revenue management and hotels yielding their rates up towards arrival date, that we're seeing that the GDS is achieving higher rates. Also, statistics from Onyx Centre Source have shown that hotels see 50% higher on-site spend from clients who come via the GDS. Some of the hotels, and I just took a snapshot of corporates that we see booking year to date 2021. So even despite lockdowns in many different countries, we're still seeing the GDS being used to book for key corporates, for example, Volkswagen. Now, also, if we look at domestic markets like Australia, where a huge percentage of the GDS business is booked inside the country, there is obviously more opportunity for corporate travel there as well.
Catt, maybe you will answer this, but we've just had a little message there to say that, obviously that's great. There's a really high spend and business people do tend to spend more on site, as we know. But if you were looking at a booking coming through the GDS, what kind of cost of customer acquisition should we expect? And again, if you cover that later on, I'm happy to leave it.
That is one of the most asked questions, and just with any pricing proposal that we sent out, the pricing and the fees information is the last slide, so I'm afraid you'll have to wait for that. But what we will do is we'll look at certain companies on the way through as to why the fees are as they are, and hopefully help people understand GDS fees a little bit more. So just a note on travel agents, and thank you very much to Helen Bear at Sabre for the wealth of information that you provided as I was preparing for this. I wanted to share this particularly, that nearly 20 years ago when I joined GDS, there was somebody made a comment that the GDS was archaic and was going to be dropping off. We've seen in the figures that 42 up to 79 million reservations that it's not dropping off, but also we're seeing the importance of the travel agent, both for corporate and leisure now. If I was traveling with my family, or if I was sending member of staff anywhere in the world, I'd be booking via a travel agent because they can really look after that end-to-end journey, from finding your COVID secure hotel and helping you book your flights, but also they are the experts on travel. They are the experts on the regulations in each country, and so can save the leisure traveller and the corporate traveller an awful lot of time. So we're expecting to see that more corporates booking within their managed travel policies, and more corporates looking at engaging travel management companies to manage their travel because of that duty of care, because of the the complexity around border closures, quarantine requirements, etc. So who are the GDSs? One of the questions we had, and often we hear hoteliers and people speak of the GDS as one channel. I'm on the GDS, tick, and that's it. So I really wanted to emphasize in the slide that the GDS, they are three companies, Sabre, Travelport, which is made up of WorldSpan and Galileo, and Amadeus, and Disco, which I think of, and thank you Sarah Murphy from Rate Game Disco for your information. In one line, I would say Disco in this slide is the global distribution system for online travel agents. So a top tip that I would say as well is make sure that you're represented on all of the GDSs, so Sabre, Travelport, Galileo, Amadeus, and also that you are represented on disco.
Sorry, can I just ask then, if you have direct connect with someone like booking.com or Expedia, what happens to Disco? Are they also connecting you to those channels, or are they connecting you to other OTAs? How does the Disco part work, apart from having a little dance?
I love it. If I worked for Disco, I would absolutely come on stage to DHISCO. So in brief, I would say that Disco and your channel manager are great for managing the long tail of online travel agents. I would also have a look at the Disco channel, understand all of the wealth of agents that they distribute to, because there will be specific agents, and British Airways is a great example that you can distribute to via Disco. We'll touch on that in the distribution diagram slide as well.
Perfect, thanks, Catt.
So a little bit of history, and we can share the link to the Hedner white paper, which has a history of distribution. I think it's fascinating. You may agree or disagree. So the first GDS that was set up was between IBM and American Airlines. They set up the semi-automated business research environment, SABRE, in 1959. And it wasn't until the 1970s, this was very much for airlines, it wasn't until the 1970s that the GDS became available for bookers to find accommodation for clients. It became an incredibly complex network. The GDS is on one side, the hotel reservation systems, the central reservation systems on the other side. So in 1988, the hotel industry switch company, Thisco, so the switch, which we'll touch on in various other points, was established. Now, this was a great game changer because it gave all of the central reservation systems that participated, the massive players like Marriott, Hilton's, etc., and the airline booking systems, one conduit, and it stopped the central reservation systems being pounded all the time by the look to book, like the look to book ratio jumped up. So Thisco had a very important role in supporting the central reservation systems and the airlines. Obviously, at this time, GDS was a very much thought of as a very much big group, big corporate hotel opportunity, and we'll look at how that changed. I just want to touch on Hedner, the Hotel Electronic Distribution Network Association, and Hedner put in place a lot of the guidelines that all of the representation, distribution and technology companies agree to. So for example, when you switch from one provider to another provider on the GDS, the Hedner guidelines say you can only be represented by one company on the GDS, and a GDS switch has typically 10 working days, and there's a clear letter that you send to the losing company and to the company that you're switching to. So really defining those processes. Also in 2019, a very interesting article from Travel Agent Central was that the travel industry was the second fastest growing sector in the world. And whilst we've taken a huge hit in 2020, that will rebound, because as humans, that desire to travel and that ability to travel now is still there, and we see that in people's Instagram feeds, in the planning and the dreaming that's happening now, ready for when bookings reopen again. So a top tip actually would be also open your availability now for the future date when you think you may be open again. Just want to touch, the GDSs now transact not just hotel bookings, which we're talking about, but also obviously flights, car hire, ground transportation, train, and even cruise and ferry. So the travel agent can really help the traveller to plan their whole trip. And this is really important for, you know, if you're a 5-star castle in Ireland or Bavaria, you're a golf resort in Scotland, those travellers now can go to their travel agents, and often they're specialist travel agents, and book their entire trip, including transfers, including their nature sightseeing on the Isle of Mull, which is my home island, I think, at the moment. Okay.
So sorry, Catt, just to kind of clarify that, because one of the questions that I got asked before was, what if I don't have a lot of corporate business? Should I still be on the GDS? So I'm guessing that kind of answers that yes, even if you're, you know, this lovely resort on the Isle of Mull or Bavaria or wherever you are, if you have a high percentage of leisure, really GDS is key for your booking and distribution plans?
So yes, absolutely. And there's two elements to this. One is look at the customers, look at who your target customers are now, who your target customers were in 2019, and how that is changing. I'd urge every accommodation provider to look at having a really good, solid, diverse distribution strategy. So it's about looking at who your bookers are, who your guests are, and getting the plumbing in place, because GDS, as the systems, are very much that plumbing that connects the booker with your accommodation. And I'm saying accommodation, I remind myself to say this a lot, because we've seen a massive growth in the serviced accommodation, apartments and aparts hotel area. And those properties have really been flourishing because of those requirements from their bookers, and particularly with longer lengths of stay now. So there is the need. Also now there's the accessibility, and we'll touch on that later on as well. The GDS is now considerably more accessible to the independent property than it's ever been.
I've got one more question for you, and I'm sorry, I'm really not going to get your name right. I'm so sorry. I'm going to apologize in advance. It's Lotaris. So just says, hi Catt, great presentation. Given the short lead nature of GDS, what sort of demand trends are you seeing for the industry as a whole? And I've got one more after that, but if you want to take that.
So what sort of trends are we saying in terms of that booking?
Yes, with brief time, I guess, yeah.
Either very short or longer, with little in the middle. And the reason for that is there's definite things that some people know that they're going to have to travel for, and they want to secure that room, they want to secure that travel, they want to make sure that they're getting their vaccine, they're lining up their tests, etc., etc. Or the very short, which is that hesitancy, and either it's kind of immediate essential travel, or that hesitancy to book. Yeah, so it's a lot of same day. So the Network Rail business that was booked the other day for the hotel that I was speaking to, was a lot of that was literally being booked on the same day to meet a specific requirement. I don't know whether it was because of the snow or whatever, but so yeah, either very short or
very long. Okay. And I've got one more, I suppose, housekeeping question from Catherine. Do you get the guest contact details, email and phone number? We've had issues in the past with Expedia, network sites like Dispels and or Agencia.
yes.
We need to take, yeah. So you see, my pronunciation is terrible. We need to be able to contact guests pre-arrival. So do you get the contact details? Booking comes through the yes.
Work with your supplier to request the information that you need. So a lot of serviced accommodation providers, maybe they need to communicate with the guest because there isn't a 24-hour check-in. So work with your GDS supplier, or the agent or agencia, for example, or HRS, to make sure that you're requesting the information that you need, either from the agent or from the guest. The GDSs are limited in what they can pass through, so you will need to kind of ask for what you need. Yeah.
Perfect, thanks. I'll let you go on, and I will keep interrupting you, Catt. Sorry.
So, very briefly, travel agents are increasingly loving independent hotels, particularly on the leisure side, but also on the corporate side, that people want to stay in a property that is of the place that they're staying in. This is something that we represent to travel agents all the time as a representation company. We're always highlighting to the travel agent why the travel agent would want to stay in an independent hotel. And we're also, for example, you work with the Business Travel Association, the GBTA as well, to really highlight and market independent hotels to the agents. So we'll look at how an independent property can access the GDS. I look at it as there's two sides to do GDS. One is representation, full service, global, demand generating representation and connectivity. I looked on Amadeus the other day, there's about 380 codes, GDS codes on Amadeus, 300 and separate. We'll touch on what a GDS code is in a minute, on Amadeus. So how do you navigate through that as an independent property or as an independent group? And so there are central reservation system providers. So for example, HotelRes, we use the Synexis Sabre central reservation system. There are also then the soft brands, so small luxury hotels, Relais and Chateau, and those really consumer marketing organizations. Design hotels is worthy of particular note here, because I think they're looking very well at the very high end consumers traveling at the moment and looking at how we drive that inspiration side. In the middle sits representation companies who provide both the connectivity, but then who are also heavily invested in driving the demand to the property. Because it's very easy to be on the GDS, but it's like being in a supermarket. You want to be in that prime position on the shelf at eye height. You also want to have a brand that the buyer is going to recognize and trust. So properties are listed on the GDS under a GDS chain code. So HotelRes's GDS chain code is HO, but we also provide private label GDS to, for example, Durant hotels. So larger groups and properties that have a huge amount of GDS business can have their own GDS chain code. So good examples of that would be Jumeirah, Delata Hotel Group, which have a number of brands under their DA chain code, and the Juries Inns. There are only about 130 unused codes at the moment. Hedna, the Q1 chain code availability matrix, only has 130 two-letter codes that aren't being used. And that really goes to show the massive increase and investment that all of these different companies have made in being on the GDS. So that investment always shows to me that it is a very much worthwhile channel for these groups and properties to be investing in. So I want to touch on Disco. We've mentioned the global distribution system for online travel agents. The switch is now part of RateGain. The reason I mention the switch is because we'll touch on that when it comes to the fees. Also, for larger groups and chains, there are two ways of connecting with the GDSs. Some central reservation systems connect through the switch to the GDSs, to the global distribution systems, and some hotel groups have direct connects to each global distribution system. It is an ongoing debate. One major global chain is soon to move back to a switch connection to the GDS, and others are currently looking at direct connects to the GDS. As an independent hotel or a group of hotels as independent or considering private label, I'd definitely say, work with your COS provider, work with the company like HotelRes to identify what is the best route for you to access the GDSs. Disco and this element for the OTAs can also, sometimes it's called the Online Distribution Database, the ODD, the HCD, or the ADS systems. So on your invoices, you may sometimes see those different companies can call this different things.
So, Catt, sorry, just someone's asked for a little bit of clarity there. So if you're an independent hotel, you're not on the GDS at the minute, do you need hotel representation companies such as yourselves, such as HotelRes, or do you need a channel manager such as SiteMinder or The Edge or something like that? Like, how many steps in that do you need? Oh, is that the next slide? Woohoo!
So and it was fantastic to see Sally Richards and some of the other people presenting on distribution. So today we're very much going to focus on the GDS element. I spent an awful lot of my time, and a big part of my job with strategic partnerships is working with the property management system companies and the channel managers. An independent hotel, yes, needs a GDS representation company to put them onto the GDS. So an independent property, and even the groups like Legacy Hotels in the UK or Sarova, they would still go via a GDS representation company to get on their property's content onto the GDSs. And that's definitely what I would recommend. I would also recommend the rates and availability are being managed where possible by the property management system. That there is an interface between the central reservation system and the property management system. Property management system is the core. Many central reservation systems also provide the booking engine, and I mean, this Nexus booking engine for us, I just think is the gold standard, and that can therefore be interfaced directly to your PMS. I would also suggest you can use your COS to manage the important high producing channel connects like booking.com, and I know that Sally's with me on that. I also know that some of the channel managers, there is a constant debate. I think my top tip would be talk to your identify your distribution supplier and talk to them about what is going to be the right plumbing to connect your bookers and your property. But those PMS interfaces are more accessible than ever before. So it's definitely worth talking to your PMS company as well.
Perfect. Yeah, I think everyone realizes now, Catt, that connection is the way to go, and the more integration that you can have to take all those other steps out of the way, the better. We've just had one question here. Like, are all the GDS adding the ability for people to book activities? Maybe you cover that later on.
The actual systems themselves have a variety, and there are lots of companies coming out now who are also then enabling not the GDS to make the booking, but the agent to make the booking, if that answers the question. Yeah.
Okay, no, that's great. Thank you.
So, top tips and actions that you can do right now. The first thing that I would do is request an extract, an HOD extract. The HOD is your hotel description pages. Request that from your GDS supplier. Review your content. And also, perhaps look at a SWOT analysis of your competitors that are specific to that channel. So as a property, your competitor for a leisure booker or a meetings booker or a wedding may well be a very different competitor property to your competitor on the GDS. So request that HOD extract. Traveller safety and cleanliness certifications are being updated in all of the GDSs. So Sabre, for example, have enhanced, and Synexus have enhanced hygiene and cleanliness protocols. Make sure that you are ticking those boxes, reviewing that content and reflecting your protocols and everything as they are today. Communicate your social distancing and hygiene measures, because for an agent, they only have the content when they're in that process and they're making that reservation. They only have the content that you load. So make sure that you're loading that full information for them and making it easy for them to access that. And then this will support a lot of the work that's being done by industry bodies like the Business Travel Association in restoring this traveller confidence. And that traveller confidence is really going to come from the vaccine and also from that communication from the industry.
Catt, I have one question here from Dana. Are there companies other than TravelClick who can help us get stats and data on booking insights in our market or a particular concept?
Absolutely, yes. So, well, I can speak to what we do at HotelRes. We have a global corporate booking database. And when a good representation company gets an RFP, you don't just look at that RFP in isolation. Sorry, request for proposal, which we'll touch on, for one property. You also look at, as Hilton would look at all of their other hotels and which other hotels may be good for that corporate client. We also look at which other of our hotels would be good for that corporate client. We also, as we're an IATA registered agent in our own right, so we can see the GDS, so we can show a hotel, this is what you look like today, and this is what your competitors look like, and help, a full service representation company can help you do that SWOT analysis. Some of the connectivity companies can't, but it's also not their job. It is kind of sometimes in a way unfair to ask some of the suppliers to do this work because it's just not the way that they're set up, but absolutely a full service representation company can help you with all of that.
Thanks, Catt. I do have some questions from my lovely friend Alistair, but it's about payments, which I think you cover later on. So I'm just going to flag those, Alistair, if you don't mind, and I will get to them, promise.
Cool. So thank you again to Sabre for this information. 89% of agents rely heavily on the HOD pages, those content description pages. So absolutely top homework is to review and complete that. Your representation company will assist you in doing that. At HotelRes, we use a content tool, Res to Market, to update our information. So that's all online. But ask your representation company how that you can do that as well. Oh, yes, points of interest. So 34% look at attractions and points of interest. So make sure that your geocoding is correct. Your longitude and latitude. It sounds like a really simple thing, but something that we at Hotel review all the time and just check and keep an eye on is longitude and latitude, but also, has your country recently put in place some postcodes? Put in your Irish air code if you're in Ireland, or your postcode if you're in Qatar, or whichever country you're in. Make sure that your address is complete. If you don't have a street number, put number 1 as your property street number. Include your room size and bed types in the room description, so your square meterage. Thank you very much to Michelle King from Travelport for your top tips on this, and this was a good one from Michelle in terms of completing the room size, and also your North Star Travel media rating. We'll share a link afterwards on that, but it is a rating that particularly travel agents in America use, but North Star Travel Media will rate a hotel anywhere in the world, but that will then make sense to, for example, American travel agents. So make sure that that's listed and matches your property standards, and at least 20 geographic points of interest. So that could be local hospitals, local landmarks, all your major rail stations, airports, heliports, bus terminals. Think about how your guests will travel to your property and reflect that in your content.
Great advice, thanks, Catt.
So, images. The GDSs used to be the blue screen of death with white writing and the black screen of death with green writing. I've got one image, one GDS screenshot in this presentation because it's not pretty. But the GDS is no longer just these DOS screens. Now they have graphical user interfaces, website looking screens that are a lot more user-friendly for the agents, and they contain images, they contain rich content. So how do you manage your images today? And when were they last updated? Are your images loaded to the best practice specifications? At HotelRes, we use Leonardo. Many companies use Leonardo. There's also Ice Portal. So your representation company may use one of those two, but really, find out what images you have loaded and when they were last updated. Do they reflect your socially distanced layout? Have you changed your room amenities? Have you changed your furnishings? Really make sure that you're reflecting your property as it is now. And as a representation company, we're working with a number of photographers to help our hotels to do this, because it is just so important now, having these images. I've forgotten the percentage from the slide earlier, but it's a high percentage of agents that are looking at these slides, and quite naturally so. You can also load your COVID certification logos as well onto Leonardo Res Media, certainly, so I'd look at doing that. So rates, my one and only GDS screenshot. We won't talk too much about rates, but basically, I can't emphasize enough how important it is, and you'll know from a revenue management perspective, Adrienne, that having a clearly defined rate and distribution strategy. GDS is just one part of your broad route to market of how anybody comes to book your property. Make sure that it's clearly defined, and yes, rate parity, certainly to your best available public rate, so your lowest monetary value unrestricted public rate, but also that rate's got integrity. So there may be lower rates available on your own website, but making sure that makes sense. So maybe your corporate rate has a shorter cancellation policy, and in return for that 6 p.m. same day cancellation, that rate is a little bit more expensive than your promotional rate, which has further in advance cancellation policy.
Great advice. Good rate strategy, Catt. Definitely top of the list.
So corporate rates, something that, and I think Amy Horgan of the Talbot collection maybe well be on this call, but something that we do with our hotels and that I very much enjoyed doing with Amy was looking at your corporate bookers. So take your top 20 is a good start of corporate bookers. Who do they work for? How do they book? Do you have visibility in your PMS and through all of your systems of who that customer is? So looking at customer relationship management, I think, is going to become particularly important. Identify who those corporates are. Can you have a local negotiated rate? Do they have a travel management company? You may have a link to Janine booking in their local office. ABB Kent Meters down the road, but they also book via, for example, a massive global consortia. So make sure that you're identifying those, and now is an ideal time to do that because an awful lot of those businesses are still going, and for example, Bosch is another great example. They will start traveling again because their salespeople, they're not going to say for a major pitch, oh, this can only be online. Oh, but my competitor is going to be face to face. I need to be there as well. So that business travel is going to return, and to be ready for that, I would absolutely, identify the corporates, load the corporate negotiated rates, identify which corporate travel management companies they're booking via. If you're struggling to do that, so for any Hotel Res members on the call, you absolutely ask Emma and the demand sales team. Your representation company can oftentimes help you find that booker. Also, then there are the GDS's own rate programs, and oftentimes there isn't necessarily an additional fixed cost to participate in these. So the Travelport's exclusive rates, and there's also the consortia that are owned by the GDSs. There's human beings behind each of these channels, and each of the consortia. So when it comes to driving more GDS business, for example, we work really closely with the GDSs as well, because it's in their interests to help the hoteliers drive that business. The hoteliers are the customer, and also to support the travel agent and support the travel agent in transacting that business.
Catt, we've got a load of questions. Do you mind if I just hop in?
Go for it. I think we might be running over.
Well, of course, there's RFPs, there's always questions. So one that we got before was, why do I have to pay for some RFPs and not others? Okay.
So some of the consortia, the likes of the American Express program, etc., are traditionally paid for requests for proposals. So essentially what you're paying for with an RFP is the marketing and the enhanced coverage that comes along with that that package and that program. Now, there's two ways of doing these paid for programs. One is the paid consortia. Another is pay on performance, which we call POP. So some representation companies, so for example, Hotel Res, we have pay on performance consortia. So if you were to take all of the money that you could pay to participate in some of the consortia, you could be paying $17,000 in consortia fees. Now, obviously for 800 bedrooms on a main road in a major city, paying those fixed consortia fees can be cost effective. But for the majority of independent hotels and groups, and also sadly at the moment with the current climate, pay on performance is, I think, a very strong prospect, and that's where you just pay an enhanced commission on the consortia and travel management company programs. I've included some of our preferred partners here on this slide, and then each rep company will have a varying degree of partnerships as well. Corporate RFPs you don't traditionally have to pay for unless you have an agreement with your GDS company where you're not paying for an RFP tool itself, you're just paying per bid. I would personally say for the majority of properties, you're better off paying for your Lanyon license or your Res to Market license and managing all of your RFPs in one place rather than paying per bid, because you don't want to be thinking, oh, I've got an opportunity, but it's going to cost me X amount to participate. Just participate in all the opportunities in one tool.
Okay, perfect. I am very conscious of your time, Catt, but we have some really interesting questions. I'm going to try and rattle through them because I know you've got some slides to get through as well. And so don't have a name on this one, but what is the best practice for displaying rates on the GDS? Flexible rates first and then discounted rates with restrictions. I seem to be receiving mixed advice. Any thoughts?
It is a huge debate, and I would say your clearly defined best available rate. So lowest monetary value, publicly available, unrestricted, standard cancellation policy and guarantee rate, best available rate. Then if you've got like a super flexible corporate, which has 6 p.m. day of arrival cancellation, or it's a promotional rate, then that the GDSs recommend 4 to 5 published rates. We are still seeing hotels loading, and even with Thibaut Catala, I've had this debate about one of your last speakers, loading advanced purchase rates. Yes, you can still load them, but I definitely wouldn't be pushing them up the top of your ranking. I would put your best available rate as the primary one. Agents will search for, and this is why participating in the kind of like the pay on performance or the agency biasing or the travel management company programs is really important. Agents will search for their own rate codes. Whether that's WIN or CCRA or BCD, they'll search for their own rate codes. And corporates, when they're booking for corporates, they will also search for hotels under that corporate rate code. So make sure that your pseudo city codes, your PCC, are loaded and mapped with your corporates, because that will decide where in the ranking those rates come up as well. Does that make sense?
I have another rate question from Nicholas. What are your views on rate squatting, which I have to say is a term I don't know. So,
okay. It's very naughty, don't do it. Rate squatting is when a major global companies like Oracle, and the hotel shall remain nameless, have a global RFP. Hotels invest an awful lot of time and effort in participating in RFPs. Travel management companies, consortia and agents invest in managing that travel process. Rate squatting is where a hotel loads a rate that has not been agreed by the contract. So the RFP forms a contract between hotel and corporate or agent, and rate squatting is where a hotel loads a rate that they haven't got a contract for. Now, I'm dead against it. But if you want to get into an RFP and if you've got a business case to get into a request for proposal, don't squat on that rate. Work with the human being behind that rate. Work with your representation company. So, any hotel, Res Hotel, call the demand team, Emma, Tom, David, speak to the guys and say, who books this? How's it booked? Can you get me into that program? And also leverage your local corporate contact, because the rate, the travel management companies do audit rates. Okay, very important top tip. I'm going to skip on to availability because it ties into rate squatting. Make sure the rate is loaded properly according to the contract, and that your availability is open for the agreed period of time. So one of the questions we had was in terms of RFPs for 2021. Quite naturally, all of us in hotels, representation companies, tech providers and travel agents are, working from home, all of the challenges we have. Make it easy for your suppliers and bookers to find you by having that availability open. Don't go dark. So even if you're closed now, if I was a hotelier, if I was speaking to hoteliers in Ireland, I'd say, look at opening your availability from the 1st of April or earlier if you're open for essential people.
Okay, again, sorry, Kat, I know that we're taking up a lot of your day here, but I've got a really interesting question from Krista. We are currently receiving RFPs for this year. However, the high costs of participation are putting us off due to COVID and not having regular levels of corporate travel. What would your advice be for the current situation?
Krista, I would want to know an awful lot. To answer that question, I'd want to know an awful lot more about your business. If high cost of participation, if it's a paid bid, so for example, if it's the consortium or the travel management company and there's a fee to participate in that bid, then it's a commercial decision whether you talk to your supplier or that company and find out whether they predict a return on investment for that. If you're a HotelRes member, find out if it's a pay on performance client, because then you can participate and then just pay for the reservations you get. If it's a corporate RFP, if you're being invited to a corporate RFP, I'd really urge hotels to participate. Yeah.
Okay, final one. Do a lot of corporate rates get booked online with online booking tools such as Concur or Get Here, where the agency is just a fulfillment channel?
Yes. So you could see the request for proposal could be managed by Amex or CWT, but it could be fulfilled through a corporate self-booking tool. And that's why content and images is so important, because I was talking to a booker, somebody who works for Shell, and they're saying, oh, we book via our own website. Their own website is their self-booking tool, where the rates and availability are coming from the GDS. So it's so important that the rate is loaded accurately, the content is accurate and complete, and those images are loaded, because with those self-booking tools, it can be the guest that's booking. And of course, the guest isn't a professional travel booker. The travel agent is a professional travel booker. They know how to book hotels.
Okay, I have a few messages here, Kat, because obviously it was 10 till 11 and there's a few people dropping off, but there's one person that needs to go in a moment, so I just want to get their question in. So how does billing and settlement occur? And are there any rules for virtual card payments in future?
Okay, must touch on interfaces later. We'll hop onto commissions. Yes, virtual card settlement. The payment area now is absolutely massive and a presentation in itself. If I have to pick two key points for somebody right now, would be use a commission processing tool. We use Onyx Center Source. They're the global leader and pretty much have the monopoly, because you need to ensure that your travel agents are getting paid in the right currency, the accurate amount, and in a timely manner. So talk to your representation company about how you can make sure that you do that, and also communicate that you are doing that, and communicate the commission that you're paying on the GDS. Yes, does that answer the question?
Perfect. Thanks, Catt. Thank you.
So two final points. One is on interfacing and accessibility to independent hotels. Interfaces are more accessible now than ever, and we have some fantastic property management system companies, PMSs like Guestline and Muse and Apaleo, who are working with all of the different widgets and channels that a hotelier might want to connect to facilitate that for hotels. So really, make sure that you're interfaced so that you can give that availability with confidence to your global distribution systems. Often your corporates will request last stream availability. Yeah, and talk to all of your suppliers and make sure your suppliers are talking to each other. So a big part of my role is working with our strategic partners, not just the strategic partners that are hotels and groups, but also the property management systems, the RMSs, and the channel managers as well.
Thanks, Catt.
Last slide. We get an awful lot of questions from, and we see an awful lot of confusion in the industry of how GDS is built, and this kind of myth that it's an expensive channel. Different GDS representation companies charge in different ways. Broadly, they're made up of 3 sections, which added together are not actually necessarily any more expensive than your online travel agents or even your total cost of sale through your own booking engine. So it's important, and I know that you do a lot of work on this, Adriana, on looking at cost of sale. So typically a GDS fees that you pay will be made up of the fee that you pay your supplier. So for example, Hotelres, your GDS switch fee. This could be called a pass-through fee, a switch fee, or I've even seen a look-to-book fee. So the fee that goes to the switch and the actual GDSs themselves, and then that travel agent commission percentage. The vast majority of hotels and hotel groups globally pay travel agent commission. There are some limited service, low star rating or unstarred groups that don't pay travel agent commission, but they have a massive global brand that the agents kind of know that they don't pay travel agent commission, and it's a strategic and commercial decision they've made. But as an independent property and an independent group, travel agent commission is very much something that you should be paying and communicating to the agent who is the booker.
Okay, and we had one very quick last question. I know sort of back in my day of working in travel agencies, we used to get told if there were certain hotels that had put their commission up for a certain amount of time, to try and encourage us to book those. Does that still happen, Catt? Is that still a thing? Is it a good way to try and increase your travel agent business by increasing commission or doing some sort of promotion?
Yes, so there's 2 ways of doing that. One is to do that yourself as an independent property, and you can publish that on your feed, and you can do marketing. Every booker that books you can run a report from your central reservation system to market to that agent, market to that booker, and of course when the guest arrives, market to that guest. Thank that travel agent for their booking. For example, you can also do marketing, have a QR code with the rate plan on your communications with your travel agent. So was that, yes. So then also you can do that as part of your representation company. So, for example, at Hotelres, some of our preferred partnerships have an enhanced commission to the travel agent, and the travel agent knows that they can search, hotels located under the HO chain code in London, so HLHOLON / their own rate code, and they know that they're going to get a portfolio of hotels with an enhanced commission. So there's two ways of doing it. One is as a property, and another is with your rep company.
Catt, honestly, we could talk all day, because I very seldom meet people as passionate about their subject as you. And people always say that I'm this revenue nerd, and you're this GDS nerd. And I use the word nerd as an absolute compliment to you. It's just lovely to see you so knowledgeable and so passionate. So Catt, thank you very much. As I said right at the beginning, maybe for those of you who weren't maybe on right at the start, there's a lot of organisation goes into these. Catt and I have spent quite a bit of time together, and Catt gives up all of this time, puts all of these slides together completely free of charge. So we are absolutely privileged to have had you on today. Catt, thank you so much, and some lovely little feedback coming into the chat there. So thank you. Everyone who has registered today will get a full recording. As I said at the beginning, we're going to keep this closed, and so it won't be made public, but anyone who registered will get a recording. You'll also get some links to let you register for the final two of this series, which are the next 2 Thursdays. And then we've got the wonderful Michael Hayward kicking off our third and final series in March. So Catt, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today. And as I say, you will get the recording, everyone. But Catt, thank you, and some lovely feedback. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it. And if you've got any other questions, please do fire them across, because yeah, I happily talk about GDS all day.
Yeah, and we'll make sure that your contact details are on that email as well. And to everyone who joined, we've also got a lovely little free gift that we're going to give you as well out to everyone who registered. So you'll get that on the email as well. And Catt, thanks again, and I'll talk to you very soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye. Bye.